Okay, hello everyone. Today it is September the 7th, 2024, and I welcome you to this edition of the Salons of Spirits. And I'm your host, Rick Florence. I intend on challenging your homeostasis. Look that word up, you might find it interesting. And sincerely hope that you find the information interesting and informative and thought-provoking, and perhaps you can improve your discernment capabilities as we go down the road with all the things we're going to be talking about, and different ways of looking at things and pointing things out that you probably haven't thought of before. At least you might not have. So this session, I guess I want to talk about a little bit about just kind of what we talked about before for a second. Just so you know, we talked about this book. This is James Madison's notes on the debates in the Federal Convention when they wrote the Constitution. And you can get a copy of this book. It's published all over the place. It's awesome. Awesome book. This was a bicentennial edition. That shows you how old I am. But anyway, in here they definitely talk about the money and the paper money and what we're not allowed to have. And I also talked about when the United States was created, and that it was created under the Articles of Confederation, not the Constitution and not the Declaration of Independence, like most people think. And I figured I would show you, and I went and I cut out the video, a little piece of it. And you can go on the internet and look up the Declaration of Independence. Problem is, the pictures I can see for the most part are really faded, and it's very difficult to see what the writing is. You know, that would be a great thing for AI, is to go in there and fix the darkness of these things and pull out the words more clearly. But this right here is Article 1 of the document. And you can pause the video if you want to watch some of these slides. I'm not going to hold them up there for y'all to read them. So it says right here in Article 1, it says the style of this confederacy shall be, quote, the United States of America, end quote, with a capital T on the. So that's the name of the United States of America. That's the under the Constitution. Now the entity called the United States, or just United States, is not that entity necessarily. They've done all kinds of crazy things with laws and passing regulations about, or passing statutes or emergencies and that sort of thing. So we'll talk about that down the road. So I wanted to also remind you that we talked about the concept of void for vagueness. Void for vagueness. Now this is out of Black's Law Dictionary. And we also talked about how Black's Law Dictionary is a different dictionary than the English Webster Dictionary or whatever dictionary that everybody else uses, that the common people use. And whenever you're reading a statute or a law, you need to go track down the definitions, especially if the word is a key word. They've even held that the word shall means may. That's how crazy a system has gotten. They shall do this. And then they go, oh, well, they may do this. It's the attorneys the lawyers have just totally and completely nitpicked every little thing and totally got away from the concept of what were the intent of the founders or the intent of the legislators when they wrote the statute. That's what they should be ruling on. They shouldn't be making it up. But the problem is, today, we don't know what they mean, what they intend. They pass these big, huge bills that are a mile thick, and the bill, everybody's acting like it's law. How in the world is a bill that nobody reads, that's piled up in a big pile and nobody understands, possibly be law? As soon as they try to do anything under those laws, the courts, if they were good courts and they were honest people, they would say, nope, sorry, we're not, that whole statute is unconstitutional. Boom, because you don't even know what you did. How can you get the feel for Congress and the intent of the law if they didn't tell you what it was? They just printed a whole bunch of stuff and they didn't even read it themselves. That's a whole nother story. So one of the things we were talking about, and that's paper money. That, you know, in the debates, they specifically said they did not want paper money. And you know, I talked to you about that a minute, and I read a couple of the quotes, but I thought there was one. If I can find it here, I'll read. Let's see. Let's see here. That's not the right one. Okay. Now I tagged it. I mean, I've got to tag it in the right spot here. Sorry about. Oh, okay, here we go. Sorry. All right. So I told you guys about a couple of them, comments that they made, but they actually said that over and over again that they didn't want paper money. Now, some were for paper money. Like it says, Mr. Mercer was a friend of paper money, and he thought at the present state and temper of America, he should neither propose nor approve such a measure. And he liked paper money. And you can go find out who these guys, different ones, you know, which states that they represented when they were at this convention. But there was no question in this parts of the notes that he wrote. There was no question that their intent was to not allow have paper money, period. So, but the Supreme Court held that it's okay that they could have United States notes in the legal tender cases in the Civil War time, and that is the same authority that I found an article or a review by the Second Circuit, Second Appellate Court, U.S. Appellate Court, in the Second District. They call them Court of Appeals for the such and such district, and in this case it was the second district. And they said, oh, well, this issue was settled back in the illegal tender cases back in the 1800s, Civil War, during the time of the Civil War. And the problem with that is that they were talking about United States notes, where the government actually issued them and they were redeeming them later. And I still think that was a wartime thing that they did under national emergency. But and we'll talk about that here in a little bit more. So, paper money. So let's talk about the definition of paper money. So here is from Black's Law Dictionary. All you lawyers use this. And I started trying to figure out and trace it down. Okay, is a Federal Reserve note of paper money? That's something I did. So if you notice and you stop that and look back there, you'll see that it says paper money, bills drawn by a government against its own credit, engaging to pay money, but which do not profess to be immediately convertible into specie, and which are put into compulsory circulation as a substitute for coined money. See Federal Reserve notes, legal tender. Compulsory circulation. Now, how in the world can they tell us that we have to use Federal Reserve notes for money? They don't have that power. And the courts have already ruled that. You don't have to use Federal Reserve notes for money. So it's interesting that the Black's Law Dictionary says it's compulsory. And that's what they think that the definition is. So we'll put that one over there. Now let's look at this next one. So let's look at a couple of historical examples of all of this stuff. So we have this document here. So have a look at that. So that is continental currency. And this particular note, copy of this, and there's a copy of one of these notes, or bills, was published in 1775. And that was before the Constitution was created. So they were already creating not the Constitution, excuse me. That was before the Declaration of Independence and before the Revolutionary War. So, and I might slip up and say Civil War during this little video, and if I do and it doesn't sound appropriate, then I just misspoke because I'm an old guy. So anyway, this says continental currency at the top, and it says $20 on the left side. And you got the little picture there of the, I don't know what it is. It looks like water and looks like I don't know what it is. Oh, the guy blowing air onto the water. Okay, I don't know what that means. But anyway, it says $20. This bill entitles the bearer to receive 20 Spanish milled dollars, or the value thereof in gold or silver, according to the resolution of the Congress held at Philadelphia the 10th day of May, 1775. So, that was like over a year before they sent the Declaration of Independence over. So they already had created the Congress, and the colonies were working together. And so the interesting thing is that the value thereof. Now, the interesting about value, the Spanish milled dollar was a coin of so much silver. And so they're saying the value thereof in gold or silver. So they're basically saying that it's either going to be the same amount of bullion, silver bullion, as in the Spanish milled dollar coin, or convert it to gold, what the standard exchange rate was for gold into silver at the time. Anyway, that's pretty interesting. That's called continental currency. Now, the interesting thing about this continental currency later is that they have a term called, I don't know, there's an old saying, not worth continental. Now, when I was growing up, people would say, it's not worth a continental damn. But I think they just didn't know what it really referred to, and it was just somebody said it and everybody keeps using it and they just go on down the road. That's the way a lot of things happen. But it can't happen because the Continental Congress issued currency that they couldn't redeem. And so people would say, well, they were trying to be patriotic. Well, at the time, you had this whole development of the idea of patriotism, joining that patriotism to the colonies versus the king. And there was a big bunch of stuff over that. As you know, there's a war over it all. But anyway, so the currency that they used, i.e. the money, that they call it money, that was a type of money, at that time, became worthless, the continental currency. And it's so much so that there's a story I read one time in a historical accounting of what happened. People got the money got to be worth so little that they just used it for wallpaper and stuff. I mean, it's kind of like you see pennies going up in tables and stuff. People like, I got any value for pennies. If those pennies were worth what the pennies were worth back when I was a kid, they wouldn't be sticking them all in tables. The people probably steal them. Anyway, so I have another one here. Let me show this one to you. Look at that. You can freeze it later and maybe you can read it. You can find this on the internet. I found it. I just did a search out there for continental or currency and colonial currency. And this was in 1782. So this is already after the Constitution was actually wasn't ratified, but we were under the Articles of Confederation, and the war was still, I think it was still going on. I don't even remember the date that the war stopped when they finally got rid of them. But anyway, so let's see, what else did I want to show you guys? Okay, I need to have my little piece of paper to make sure I'm following along here. Okay, so paper money, and this bill says, what this says is it says the United States of America on the 22nd day of January 1782 at 30 days sight of this fourth bill, third, second, excuse me. I'm sorry about that. Of this fourth bill, first, second, and third, not paid to David Lopez. The order of. So with that, I'll tell you about that in a minute. $12.60 livres for the interest due on money borrowed by the United States. So they're going to pay him $12, but they're going to pay it in 60 livres. And that was another word on here. It says tournois. I should have looked it up. I don't know what that means. But livres is a French money. So the $20 was basically equivalent to 60 livres. I'm not French, so I can't speak it right. Say it right. But anyway, it'd be interesting to go find out. Well, how much silver was in 60 livres, or livres, or however you say it, Livres, and versus how much was in 20 Spanish mill dollars of the time. So, and what people were using. So they used Spanish mill dollars. My understanding was that more part of it because they didn't like the English. They were pissed. So they weren't going to use their money. They used the Spanish money. And the Spanish mill dollar was very prevalent, being used in the colonies at the time due to international international trade. There was a lot more of that running around than there was English money. So anyway, that's what they did. But anyway, the thing is, the note, and what's interesting about this note is that it says 30 days sight of this fourth bill, first, second, and third. So what I'm getting from this is that they have a bill that's due in 4 times at 30 days. So they can bring it up, and you bring it up 1, 2, 3, or 4 times, and if they don't pay, and they try to go get somebody to redeem it, and they don't get the money for it, they're going to pay the money to this Lopez dude, or to what order. So some of you people who are my age will sure remember this, and even younger than me, but probably nobody even knows about it in the last 10, 20 years. It's been born in the last 20 years. But you used to take a check. When you write a check, and you write to pay the order of blah blah, and you put it on the person's name on it, and you sign the check. And then the person gets it, like who it's written to, and they can turn it over and endorse the check. When you endorse the check, you sign your name on it, and normally people just go to the bank and give it to the bank. But what you can do is you can do that, and you can hand it to another person to pay the bill to them. So you owe that guy some money, so you pay it, give it to him. Now it's got that guy's signature. You can then sign it and take it and put it in the bank, or pass it to another person. And then whoever's the last guy on the list can go redeem it at the bank, where they're going to get the money from. Now, obviously in the world today, that causes a problem with, well, who's who and how many people and all that, but it's still legal, as far as I'm aware, to do that, and it's still valid. Okay, so let's see. So we talked about continentals. Okay, we're going to talk about these dates. And I've got a list here of these historical dates, and I had the papers just a while ago. What did I do with it? I might have to stop this video. Let's stop the video. We'll put another one on there. Okay, we're back. So, there's a list of dates and events that I wanted to discuss with you guys and tell you a little history of the money. Because, you might wonder, well, how do we end up with the money that we have in our pocket? We go back to the Constitution when they wrote it, and they said it's got to be gold or silver. So what the heck happened? And everybody said, oh, well, dude, we just went off the gold standard, overnight. Well, it wasn't that way. And there's more than one gold standard. When you say the gold standard, well, what do you mean? What exactly does that mean? And that's one of our big problems that we have in our country and in the world, is that people use words and terms that they don't even understand what they're saying. They say backed, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But because I want you to understand what backed is. So let's go through this history a little bit. And I know it can get kind of tedious, but I'm going to try to make it where you can kind of remember. And I don't have to worry about the dates exactly. Just remember kind of the time frames of when these things happen, because what's important about dates is making sure that you understand the order, because when you want to figure out how you got here, you need to know the path that led you to where you are. And that kind of thinking is always good, because everybody born on this planet right now all was born in the middle of the movie. The movie ain't over yet. It may not ever be over. Shoot, this planet's pretty billions of years old. So, it can be a long, long time before the movie's over. So we come into it, we participate in our little act part, and then we'll die, we're gone, we go back, maybe we'll come back again. I wouldn't be surprised if that really happens, because I've seen too many people born and they're totally different. I mean, unless one person will be born and they are so, intelligent and serious, and then other ones couldn't give a hoot about anything. And I'm thinking, well, how do you get these two totally different attitudes from, if everybody came from the same parents, same time? There's something's funny if it's not more to it. And I think there's spiritual things involved in it. But let's go on and get on to this little details here. So we talked about the United States of America, and I showed you that what that meant. And it was founded when they did the Articles and that of Confederation. And it was 1778 when they ratified it, I believe. So then we had the Constitutional Convention. So remember, there was a good amount of time from the time that the Articles were signed, and then we operated underneath the Articles. So from 1777 to 1787, the Constitutional Convention is when they wrote the Constitutional Convention, when they had the Constitutional Convention, and they eliminated paper money out of it. And then they ratified the Constitution 2 years later in 1789. Now, despite the Constitution saying that it would come into force if only only 9 of the colonies, they waited until all of them, all 13, and ratified it for it to go into force. And so it took another couple of years. And so they used the word dollar, so we know the dollar's in the Constitution. And we talked about, I don't know if you talked about it or not, but I'm trying to remember if I told y'all. I did another version of this video. And the problem if you do that is you go, oh, I remember I said it, but I said it in the right video. So I'm going to tell you anyway. So the Constitution ratified the word dollar. So, you know, if I went back and looked at a statute about the word dollar, you can't find a statute in the United States Code that defines that term. And I believe, and I've seen other people talk about this, but I believe that the reason is because if they change the word by statute that is being used in the Constitution, then the problem is going to be that they actually can say in effect that they changed the constitutional meaning. Now, maybe people might think they know what it is, but thinking you know what it is and writing it on the law is not necessarily the same thing. And so they can't ratify the Constitution that way. They're modified. They have to go through the ratification process. So they have never defined it. But what they did do is go scientifically figure out what it was. They went out in the community. They sent treasurer, I think it sent the treasurer, Hamilton, out to find out how you got to give specifications. If you're going to make more coins, you got to know exactly what's in these coins. And considering the fact that they're being worn and used and all, Spanish milled dollars, a lot of them were in pretty rough shape, but everybody was accepting it as dollars. So as at face value, or full, like as if it had that much silver in it. So they went out and they essayed it, gave a report to Congress saying, here's the numbers we said, and here's what we propose to make new U.S. dollars, but we're going to make them at this purity and everything. And that's what they did. So Congress didn't define it, other than to define how many grams of silver, or grains of silver, not grams, they didn't use grams, grains. Oh, that's another thing. You know where the word in English, in our English measurement system called grains, you know what that means? And where it came from? Why do you call it grain? Well, I wondered that a long time ago, and I looked it up. Turns out that the grain of barley is very consistent in its weight. How much of one grain is just like another grain of barley. And so they use that as the amount, and I guess they figured a way and said, okay, well, here's the official grain. And they said that weighs this much weight, and so therefore all the grains in the future be based on that. So I guess you could take a piece of metal and make a piece of metal that weighs exactly what that grain of barley does, and now you can reproduce them. So then in 1792, so now we're in the Constitution's in power, and they decided to make the coins, and as a result of the events, Hamilton going out and determining, what the specifications would be. But the problem is they fixed the gold to silver ratio. So he said make dollars out of silver that have this much silver in them, and then make dollars out of gold that have this much gold in them. And that did a fix of price of ratio of gold to silver. And that's price fixing in a market, and it doesn't work. Because what happens is people, when the market fluctuates, and now all of a sudden they say, oh, well, it's dollars. Now we have, this many silver dollars to buy that gold coin because the gold is getting more valuable because maybe we had a big old gold strike or silver strike like the Comstock lode back in the 1800s. And also there's more silver floating around, and that means it's worth less. And so because it's worth less, it would buy more gold. And when you start saying, well, it's dollars face value, one of them's going to stop circulating because people will grab the ones they can get. They can get gold silver coins for cheaper with the same dollar that they had, they're going to go get the silver coins and get rid of the gold. They're going to spend the gold. So, or they're going to save it and not, because it's buying a lot more stuff. So, there's a thing called Gresham's Law, and you can look up that too. And I don't have time for that right now. So then in 1853, they started messing with things really bad. And that's just before the Civil War. And they changed the amount of silver in a dime and a quarter and a half dollar to be less than what was in a silver dollar. And what I mean by that is 10 dimes had less silver in them than $1. And before that wasn't the case. The 10 dimes had exactly the same amount of silver in them that the dollar did. Now, I don't know why they did, or what they, let's put it this way, I don't know what the claim was that they did it. But what happened and what would be the result? Well, if I go to the store and I'm going to buy something and it costs $1, then, and I know that there's more silver in a silver dollar than there is in the 50-cent pieces, I'm going to use 50-cent pieces and I'm going to put that silver dollar away. Because the silver in it's worth more than what was in the 2 50-cent pieces. So obviously you're going to do that. And what the net effect of that would be is that you're not going to see the silver dollar circulating as much anymore. They're going to stash them away. Now, that's a backdoor way of getting rid of the silver. So, at least in my opinion, it is. That's the way I'm looking at it. But so anyway, we got on to 1862. We had the Greenback Act, war power. I think it's a war power when they let them have greenbacks, use it for money. Because Lincoln didn't want to borrow money from the bankers because he didn't want to end up us owing so much money and the United States owing so much money to the bankers that they own the country instead of the other way around. And I think these guys were, I think there was a kind of issue going on back then, but they probably were funding the South as well. So anyway, and it was 1869 they had the legal tender cases came up. So that got challenged that you can't do that. Constitution says gold and silver money. And like I said, I've never seen or heard of a case where they went back to the original notes in the Constitutional Convention and pointed out the fact that, hey, they said exactly no paper money, period. They didn't just say they were calling bills of credit, but they were using the word paper money. And they said no paper money. But the Supreme Court, there's some shenanigans from what I have read about, but we'll get past that. Decided that they were going to allow U.S. notes. Now, that's United States note by the United States government. There ain't a bank over here that could do this. This is just United States government. So, in 1910, some dudes meet up on Jekyll Island and planned to create a big banking association and thing, and they were wanting to create, and they created the Federal Reserve, what they were doing. They were working on that. And they were conspirators because they were conspiring, and they kept it secret. Didn't tell anybody what's going on, and they wanted to change the laws. And there was a couple of very influential people that died on the Titanic that would have stopped the Federal Reserve, is what my understanding is. And there's even a sign on a wall in the Titanic Museum in Branson, Missouri. It's a pretty cool museum if you ever get a chance to go look at it. And it talked about this. That these guys the Federal Reserve might not have been around if those two guys hadn't drowned. So then in 1913, I did a little bit more. They created the Federal Reserve Act. Now, in 1913, they created they declared the income tax was ratified. And that was May. And then on December the 23rd, Christmas Eve, is so important. They passed the Federal Reserve Act and created the Federal Reserve. Now, I made a note here about the Federal Reserve Act. Oh yeah, okay, the vote. That's interesting. There were 48 states in the Union. That means there were 96 senators in the Senate. And only 68 voted. Now, this is a hell of a change for only 68 guys out of the 96 to vote, and out of the 68, only 43 voted yes. So not even half of the senators that could vote actually voted. So we got this nasty piece of work in our system, in my opinion, passed with 43 senators. And 4 of those were Republicans, and the rest were Democrats. The Democrats wanted this thing. Surprise, surprise. So so they passed this thing in 1933, and pretty much exactly 20 years later, the government's basically bankrupt. Roosevelt comes out, and we have this big depression going on, and all this stuff happening, and a lot of it happened because they were loaning money long, and what they would basically were doing was you have a bank account at the bank, and you could go to the bank account and you could say, well, I want my money in 90 days. They got a contract. If you watch It's a Wonderful Life, you'll see how this works. And so they said, I want my money. And the bank said, okay, well, I got to give it. The problem is the bank might have did a 10-year note with all that money. They might have loaned somebody to build a business or build a house or whatever, and it was 10 years payment. They didn't have the money. But they put in the contracts, which the average person never reads freaking contracts. And they just sign them. Now, sign here, sign here, sign here. You're just signing everything away. You don't even know what you're writing, signing. And actually, we should say any contract there's no meeting the minds, which is the way it used to be. Then it's the null and void. You can't enforce it unless you really understand that what you're talking about, what you're signing. And when you see something that's impossible for somebody to understand, you don't need to legal analyze it. When it's all complicated and everything, and got a bunch of legalese shit in there, then how can two people, the average people, possibly know what the heck they're signing and really agree? But a lot of people get hosed because of this. But anyway, so they declared that basically the United States government was bankrupt, and they issued a National Emergency Relief Act. And I got something here to show you. Yeah, here it is. This is, well, that's the income tax. Yeah, this is the resolution that they signed, proposing an amendment to the Constitution. That's right here. That's what I just took a picture of that. I thought it was pretty neat. And you can see, and there's a book. I don't know if I got the book. I got one volume of it. I saw this book from back and I bought this sucker. I thought that was pretty cool. And you may not have heard of this book, but it's called The Law That Never Was. They're talking about the 16th Amendment. I'll let you guys dig into that on your own. But there's something there, I'll tell you. All right, go past that one. Let's see. Okay, so, and we're going to come back to this in a minute. So then in 1935, which, that's before we got into World War II, right? World War I's over. We're in the time period between World War I and World War II. And that was the last year they created silver dollars. So what they've done is they have converted the mental thinking of people saying, oh, a dollar is a measurement of 371 1/4 grains of fine silver, which is why that thing had value in the first place. It didn't have value because some guy wrote his name on it. It has value because of what it actually is. But the goal of the banking guys behind the scenes is to get you to think different. You need to focus on this word dollar, this word dollar, this word dollar. And it's separate from what the money actually really is, which is the metal. All right, so now we're all living in, we're all using this. Me too. I mean, I'm using dollars and everything. That's the way my life has turned out. But, it is what it is. But just so you understand it, what's going on. And so we all say this dollar thing. But if you ever say, well, what's a dollar? Well, go look in the United States Code. You can't find it. It's not there. So, and we're going to talk about dollars here in a minute. You know what? I'm going to come back to the dollar thing. And we're going to talk about what dollars are later on. We'll see how much time we got here. 16 minutes so far. All right, I got to keep an eye on this. A crazy camera will turn off and I have to start over again. Let's see. So that was in 1935 when they stopped making the silver dollars like they're supposed to. And they had that same amount of silver in them from the very beginning all the way up to that time. And so then in 1963, the Kennedy started issuing United States notes. He's trying to get rid of the Federal Reserve and get us back to gold and silver like we're supposed to be. And so he ended up dead under suspicious circumstances. And the United States notes disappeared. Now, if you haven't seen one, they got the little red seal on them, and you can go look up United States note on the internet, and you can see one, and it says United States note. Other than that, it looks just like a Federal Reserve note, except for there's no Federal Reserve seal on the other side. It just says United States note, has Secretary of the Treasury and the Treasurer, and signing it. Now I still think there's something funny about the Secretary, the same entity signing the check, the document, both sides. Something doesn't sound right. But they're not redeemable in lawful money at all. They're just like the dollar bills you carry in your pocket right now. And those things are not going to be doing that for too long. Much longer, it doesn't look like, at least in terms of how much they'll buy. So in 1964 was the last year they made coins out of silver. And so the next year after Kennedy was killed, all the United States notes disappeared. They got them rid of them out of circulation. They collected them as they hit the bank, hit the Federal Reserve. They took them out of circulation. They don't want them in circulation. I'm going to talk about how come that is, but there's definitely some interesting ideas as to why they didn't want you to have United States notes, and they wanted the bankers' money. Now remember, the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, so that's way after the Civil War. So how is it that a legal tender case, like I talked about earlier, a case in Second Circuit that happened in this century, or the 20th century, could be claiming that the authority to have Federal Reserve notes by a private bank is okay because of the Supreme Court ruling on United States notes, which were issued by the government, where the Federal Reserve notes are issued by the bankers. Now the law says that the Federal Reserve notes are obligations of the United States. Well, that's interesting. We're going to talk